Today, on episode 67 of the Be a Marketer podcast, you'll hear from a VP of Marketing and Communications who looks to other industries for inspiration. This is the Be a Marketer podcast.
Be a Marketer.
My name is Dave Charest, Director of Small Business Success at Constant Contact, and I help small business owners like you make sense of online marketing. And on this podcast, we'll explore what it really takes to market your business, even if marketing's not your thing. No jargon, no hype, just real stories to inspire you and practical advice you can act on. So remember, friend, you can be a marketer. And at Constant Contact, we're here to help. Well, hello, friend, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Be a Marketer podcast. Hello, Kelsey Carter.
Hello, Dave Charest. How are you?
I fooled you there for a minute. You're like, is there more to that or no? Just
I think
hello.
I brought my middle name for a second. I was about to be like, whoa.
Kelsey, today, our guest is Jonny Etherington, the VP of Marketing and Communications for Care Advantage Incorporated. Of course, we're going to find out more about him, but Kelsey, what can you tell us about Care Advantage?
Of course. So Care Advantage is a home healthcare organization, and they're based in Richmond, Virginia, and they have about 40 locations across the Mid-Atlantic. Since 1988, they've been dedicated to providing the highest level of care to their patients, employees, and the community.
35 years. I love this. I love hearing stories about businesses that have been around for so long. So a long time, right? Like,
yeah,
wow.
Older than me. But Jonny believes that a big reason for the company's longevity is their commitment to the delivery of service.
Now, just so it doesn't shock you as we get into our conversation here today, Jonny is originally from Scotland, and his journey actually started in the agency world after he attended university, and he spent 10 years at an agency where he really started to hone his skills in brand development.
Yeah, and it was when he met his now wife, Nikki, when he made that big move to the United States.
Love that. His first job stateside was for a skilled home healthcare company that eventually led him to Care Advantage. He's been with the company for over 7 years.
I'm very motivated to work with good people and people that are engaged on a daily basis and challenge you on your ideas and challenge you on your expectations. And that was clearly evident from the first day I set foot in the Care Advantage corporate office. As I say, I was brought in originally as a consultant, and I'm sure you're familiar. When you start getting that feeling in your stomach that I could be here more often than I like, I really sort of had an idea that this could be something or a place that I would really like to grow. And so much opportunity, so much passion and compassion within the people that work here, but also the brand itself, right? It was a given. It's the things that marketers should grab with both hands, and that I certainly gravitate to. It was essentially a legacy brand. It was a care legacy brand where there was the founder of the company had done a great job on the local level and had really built a sort of following around it, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But to take the work that she had done and build on that was something that excited me, and the opportunities. And obviously, with it being a growth market, and that we knew from the get-go from our financial sponsor that one of our goals was to grow and take part mergers and acquisitions, a lot of M&A activity, that talks to the brand integration side of what I do. And yeah, it was just a great opportunity to do that. But like I say, people, and to this day, really is a driver for me.
When you think about kind of as you started there, and, I know like starting at Constant Contact, and I've been at the company for 13 years, and coming in, and I started as like a content developer when I started at Constant Contact, but there's something to getting the opportunity to come in and then start to implement ideas or get some quick wins or start to see something work in a way. Do you remember kind of like what was your first big win when you started there?
Do you know what? It's funny. I was thinking about this last night, driving home, thinking I was hoping you might ask me this question. So when I first came in here, one of the key, we had to create a culture, right? That was something that we could, I don't like to say copy and paste necessarily, but something that we could grow throughout the organization, and then obviously add on to additional brands that we may invite in our care family. So that was something that almost the first task through the door was a rebranding of the original core brand, or the core family of brands at that point. We had a staffing division and also the skilled home healthcare company. And it was to brand those 3 original brands. So on the back of that, I was also granted the opportunity to develop those value structure and the mission and the vision. And ultimately, we've tweaked it over the years, but essentially those cornerstones are still in place. They still formulate a lot of the communications that we do and the way that we expect our teams to act and carry themselves on a day-to-day basis. And that's without shadow of a doubt. I can remember the day that our current CEO, Tim Hanold, walked in. We were having a collective meeting on a Friday morning, and he was referring to the culture and the importance of these tools and these levers that we can connect with to drive culture across the footprint, right? Because we're used to Virginia, but now we're going into other states and so on and so forth. And he goes, we kind of need like this outline. We need these words and these drivers and, like I say, these values. And I just went, straight to his office after the meeting. I said, will this work for you? And he's like, this is what we need. And that was the big win. Again, and another hook for me. So I'm smiling. I know I appreciate this in a podcast, but it still kind of get goosebumps at that connection. And then knowing that work and your ideas that you're really overlaying on an existing structure were workable is always very exciting, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. So where you are today, what does like a day-to-day look like to you? Describe that to us in terms of responsibilities as VP of marketing.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm sure you get this answer a lot, but I'm glad to say no 2 days are the same. We obviously have key structures, right? So be that things like creative design and brand strategy that we build out on a day basis. But those communications, and this is something that we'll no doubt speak about later on, is we have 2 very distinct areas of communication. And that really becomes the foundations of how our days are formed, right? So we have a corporate level communications, and then we have what I call the community level communications. So although we have 2 clearly defined strategies around that. So for example, on the corporate side, that might include revenue drivers, right? Like digital leads, or, where we can take marketing leads from digital leads partner or through our work through SEM, etc., and drive as a positive contribution to the business on a day-to-day basis. So there's a review process. Are we getting to the leads? Are we managing those leads? So there's that element that bolts onto the revenue side of the business, if you like. But then we have other things where we're looking to build profile and establish a profile, not just in the home healthcare sector, but in broader markets. So we do a lot around leadership, thought leadership in particular. We are looking to showcase our talent and our creative, and our leaders and our chiefs and so on and so forth into different places so they can talk about our business and what we do on a day-to-day basis and raise that profile to a more, thought leadership perspective. We have the day-to-day communications that we do to our clients or our caregivers, which is obviously very important. Communication is the name of the game for both of those key audiences. So we're strategizing around that, developing content, working out delivery, how to deliver. So that's always plays part of it. We have analysis, where we're reviewing how our strategies are working and how effective they are. And then finally, the creative side, right? So building out collateral messaging, be that on social media platforms, be that on paper to our referral sources, or internally to our stakeholders internally, be that, our office teams, our schedulers, our caregivers, and so on and so forth. That there's very mixed bag of things. And we obviously slice that up in ways that we can manage on a day-to-day basis, but we always have the here and now, and then ultimately what we're looking to achieve 3 months further down the line.
So what does your team look like to help you kind of do all of this?
Yeah, so I call it an integrated marketing hub. It sounds very fancy, but it's myself, network of trusted and reliable partners, not a lot of them, but that specialize in particular areas of execution around things like digital marketing. I have a gentleman that I've worked with for the best part of 15 years, who's a freelance graphic designer in Tampa, who knows my style and my messaging inside out. So that's helpful. We have like I say, this trusted stable of vendor partnerships. And then inside, we have myself, we have a corporate communications specialist who works with me closely on, as I say, on those internal strategies. And then I have a junior comms specialist who he acts as a specialism in cinematography. So he'll help give direction around any. We don't do huge, big budget productions, but we do find it a very helpful tool and something that we deliver frequently through Constant Contact on the that we can do those videos, etc., to relay messaging in a different way. I think variety is the name of the game when it comes to that for us and how we deliver those messages to certain audiences. So that's pretty much it.
So how do you approach getting things done then when it comes to marketing? Are you guys meeting to plan for the year? Do you have particular milestones that you're going through? And then are you calendaring this up? Like how does the work actually get done?
So great question. So typically in this December of every year, what we have to make sure is that our objectives, our tasks dovetail with the overall management business objectives of the business. So we make sure that everything that we do is positive, right? That makes a positive impact on our overall objectives. So that's kind of the starting point for everything that we do. There's a review process that takes place in the November, like a corporate get together, if you like, where these are all discussed and our expectations are laid out in front of us in the November. And then we develop our strategies going into the following year across December and early January. They're reviewed, obviously run past, in my case, the CEO and signed off. And then we're held accountable to those, right? So we build our strategies out on that, if you like, that corporate level, pretty much at the tail end of each year. On a more departmental, or I say departmental, I think it's important to note that we work very closely with our operations team, our operations leadership, and our sales teams on their objectives. So everything's keying together. So we typically do that monthly. And that's where, again, it's a good point. A key sort of buzzword that you'll hear me say is that accountability, to make sure that we are delivering on their expectations and vice versa. Is not, but to be honest, it's normally the other way around.
Yeah.
And more times than not. But it's really key that, especially with multiple brands in such a number of different states, right, that we connect that regularly so we can plan out and make sure that everything is in the hands of the sales or operations teams at the right time. And not just the right time, ahead of time. So, for example, next month is Nursing Assistants Week, which is key, right? That represents our caregivers, those people that deliver the exceptional care each day. That is planned out probably 6 weeks prior. So we make sure that they're given a gift, a thank you gift for what they do. So we really have to think that far ahead. Then we're building out a constant contact messaging, right? So we can deliver it by email or text and so on and so forth to say thank you. So that planning takes pretty much 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time. There's obviously production timelines and etc. that dictate that also. And then on a week-to-week basis, I meet with my team and any of the vendor partners that I mentioned earlier. So I have a meeting every Monday morning, 8 till 10, with both Mac, who's, as I said, my corporate comms guy, and Parker, my junior comms guy, and affectionately named Donuts and Destiny. So I bring in coffee and donuts most weeks. And we sit down for good 2 hours. We review the week that we've just dealt with and what we encountered there and any challenges or opportunities that we saw. And then ultimately what we have coming up the week ahead.
What do you look for then when you start thinking about what success looks like for the business? And like, what are the things that you're like, I guess, how do you measure that success with what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's almost like a byproduct, right, of what the overall business, be it, the operations delivery and the sales team. So success is obviously making sure that we're providing exceptional care to as many people as we can in the communities we serve. And again, it drills back to that mission and value statement that, we spoke about earlier. It's very much about that for us, that as long as we're continuing to provide care in all the markets that we serve and that continues to increase, that's our measuring stick, if you like.
Gotcha.
We're helping to facilitate that.
So what do you find to be, particularly where you are right now, like what do you find to be the challenges that come in the way of kind of achieving that goal?
So I think the biggest thing as a market in general, it's quite difficult to, so reviews are important to me, right? It's like, reviews be it through Google, etc. The client perspective of that is something that we are really passionate about obtaining, right? Because it's a way that we can get better. It's a way, that is one area that I find incredibly difficult to make that connect with, simply because, again, I think it's the subject matter, it's people's health. They're not necessarily want to disclose that, but also it's a means of just getting that initial connect point. And that's always challenging for us, like that external, that reputation management part of the equation and the volume of feedback that we would like. Not necessarily the quality of the feedback, because when we have it and we get it, it's always very good. But having enough of a sample, if you like, to take those learnings and make ourselves better through that, that's always, in this particular area of business, quite a challenge for us. I think the only other point I would sort of make around sort of challenges is really ensuring that measuring the flip side of making sure people that you want to hear this messaging, because it's a really unique thing, right? This could be typically someone takes our services on board, that it's a life-changing moment. It's not necessarily, although it's becoming increasingly so, something that people would necessarily research, right? Or ahead of time. This is normally something that makes people, unfortunately, have to take that service on board and look for that additional care and support. So making sure that your brands and that association is, well, it's of paramount importance to me, right? So that's one thing that I need to make sure is that when someone is faced with a situation like that, that Care Advantage or Capital City Nurses or Silver Lining Home Health, whoever, one of those brands that the association has made and that they know where to call. But it's always going to be a challenge for us to do that, you know, because of the nature of what we do.
Yeah. So, well, talk me through a little bit here about, you've got these key audiences that you're marketing to. Obviously, you're doing like the corporate level stuff too, but like also when you start thinking about, you've got clients, right? These are the people that are like receiving the care. Then you've got your caregivers that you're talking about here that are actually, I guess I worked at like a physical therapy office in another life at some point, and the business manager and the owner did a lot of work going to the doctor's offices and, you know, making sure people knew about us so they could refer people to the office when they needed physical therapy and those types of things. So I assume you've also got this population that includes doctors, hospitals, and even the caregivers themselves that are actually doing the work for you. So like, I guess talk me through, how do you think about these audiences? And then how do you think of, like, what does that do for you just in terms of like your marketing plans on making sure you're communicating with them with the right types of messages? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So your analysis is almost exactly the same as how we would approach our communication strategies, right? So we have a sales team. They're actively engaging on a face-to-face basis with referral sources. The key communication from our side on that is to making sure that we almost punctuate their visits. So we make sure that, again, to my previous point, that that brand association is made continuously, almost on a, obviously don't do it on a weekly basis, because we have to make sure that we don't sicken people with the messaging also and make, oh, here they come again sort of thing. So we're very strategic in terms of how we deliver our electronic strategy in between the face-to-face and day-to-day visits that our sales team would be making. The second audience that you identified, you're making my job easy, is the caregiver population. Now, that can be anything from an industry recognition day, like a nursing assistants week, or it could be something really important around, you know, like scheduling, like, for example, holiday weekends, or it could be a message that we have to communicate to a specific audience out of a specific location. Or it could be around benefits. There's a whole host of reasons why we might connect with our caregivers. So that's a very important audience also. Again, the difficulty there is a little bit is like making sure that they have the ways of receiving that message. So again, we're looking to punctuate any messaging that might be delivered on a face-to-face basis from the offices with electronic communications. And then we have our clients. And again, very important in terms of the overall digital strategy that we deliver. And again, that can go everything from an opportunity where we have some kind of offer that we might want to push through, or we might have new technology or a new operations system, or we might want to talk about a family portal where they can manage their own scheduling and so on and so forth. So it's really a case of selecting the audience for the message that is relevant at that particular time with clients in particular. But yeah, very clear and distinct markets. And then or audiences, I should say. And then on the flip side of that, right, we have this whole internal side. So we have our office teams. We have our corporate teams that we're looking to communicate more of those culture drivers and so on and so forth. So 4 pretty important stakeholders within the company.
So talk me through a little bit about what you're doing then, or I want to say what pieces, like what are you using to then, when you start thinking about marketing the business, right? So I got to imagine, of course, search is going to come into play here, messaging on your website, that type of thing. I guess, what are the channels that you're kind of using overall in your marketing strategy?
Yeah, so again, very much around, depends on the messaging, it determines the platform or the tool that we use. So a couple of examples. So social media platforms are great, right? So that's a culture driver for recruiting.
Mm.
So we're very much keen to illustrate like what we stand for as a company. And one of my key beliefs is showcasing the people that do the work. And I don't try to use stock photography. It's one area that I try to avoid. I think the marketing dollars invested in photographing, like, especially around the caregiver audience, is proof, of what we stand for and our values. So I think it's a way of reinforcing that. So social media platforms are excellent for recruiting, right? We can showcase what we stand for. We can show the community activities that we're involved with or the nonprofits that we support. We can just showcase our caregivers and just say, thanks for doing just a great job, right? Same goes for our clinical teams, right? Our nurses, our sales teams, everything goes into that and are shown to reflect the overall culture of the company. Another good example is where we might use constant contact, right? Where we use the texting functionality. So we find for our caregivers, like our current caregiver audience, that cell phones are typically the best way to get engagement. The way we do that, or the way we monitor that, is we obviously have the ability to text our caregivers that are on staff, but we will typically send a link that will drive them to the landing page functionality that Constant Contact offers. And that allows us obviously to dig in, provide more information. We're just doing one currently about the caregiver journey that we offer in terms of career development and, to try and encourage people to see this as a real viable option, right, as a career and how much it's valued. And so what we try and do is we'll take 2 elements, like I say, the text and the landing page, and work them in tandem with one another. Again, great way to engage with that particular audience. And then clients, again, pretty much like to your point, we can use anything from like delivering not direct mail, but mail messaging through the snail mail, if you like, but also through the email functionality. That's paramount importance to us as well. So it really is a case of selecting the tool from the toolbox that best suits the need at that particular time.
Is there anything in particular you do to, I guess, stay on top of like the latest marketing trends so you can, when it makes sense, incorporate those into your strategies?
Yeah, well, big reader, but an even bigger podcast listener now. So there's a number of different podcasts. I've obviously listened to a few of yours in preparation for today. It's really valued. I think it's important, right? But again, key driver for me is that I believe in trying to take our learnings from different industries and bringing them into the communications and the messaging that we relay in. So again, pride point for us is that we're not stereotypical in terms of the way we deliver a message, and especially on an internal basis. We try and be quite funky around a little bit off the page around the way we deliver this. I use a lot of 80s hip hop lyrics in the cloud and look for music and other culture points that I think can shape messaging, especially in something like, which is kind of seen as like a kind of dry messaging, right? And help us stand out. So that's one of the learnings that I had from one of my first bosses back in the day, who was if you can remember the days of type designers, that was his trade. And he was very much about read a lot, take a lot of, we used to sit there with Italian Vogue, French Vogue, British Vogue, and then we'd have everything from ID, creative magazines, Campaign, etc. And he really had them front and center. So he says, take that information and look for opportunities where you can take something that's a little bit different and grab attention around that. And that's something that's always stuck with me.
I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, right? I think there are so many people in industries and, healthcare is an interesting one in many facets, just with legalities and things like that. But even when you get to this point where you're like, oh, I've kind of got like this boring industry, right? For lack of a better term, I would say. where people feel like, oh, how am I going to do something? Or how can I communicate in a non-stodgy way in many instances, right? And I think you bring up a good point that at the end of the day, I think it's important for everyone to remember, like, we're all people at the end of the day. And yes, you may be in a particular industry, but as long as it kind of matches your brand and in many ways will help you stand out and rise above the noise, if you can communicate in a way that captures people's attention and, in many instances bring some fun to it, right? To kind of capture that. I want to move into Constant Contact here a little bit. And if I'm not mistaken on the timeline here, CareAdvantage was kind of using Constant Contact before you started there. Had you had any experience with Constant Contact before coming on to CareAdvantage?
No. Really the first the first project that I did with Constant Contact was about, a month or two after me joining the company. And it was really not very glamorous, but it was around communicating a holiday communication to clients. And Constant Contact would always sort of been a kind of bit of a secret to me in a way, because it was managed by another member of my team and it kind of fell between various departments. It wasn't like there was any real ownership around it. So it was really like, when I started to see that, I guess the continuity between managing our lists and getting, making sure that we had a good grasp on the list and the people that were receiving the communications would be genuinely interested in it, right? So there's a lot on that preparation side that we invested time in. And once we had that and had a system around that, then we really started to see the more opportunities and the more avenues, I guess is the best way of saying it, we could connect and how we connect. And to my previous point, the creative ways that we could connect with these audiences, such as clients and caregivers and office teams and so on and so forth. Yeah, it was kind of awakening, I guess, in the sense that there's so much more you could do with it than I'd ever appreciated.
So talk me through that a little bit. How specifically are you using Constant Contact today?
Yeah, so it's like that toolbox that I was referring to earlier. It's right in there, right? So we use it internally, like I say, to communicate with our clients. We use that it's almost our go-to. In fact, it is our go-to. It allows us to, I say mass communicate, but send a large number of audience members in one easy process. So it's integral to our client communications. Just to add to that, the addition of the texting functionality was a game changer for us also. I've already touched on what I did with our caregivers and how it's almost like the preferred avenue for them to connect through. But ultimately, it was very good also for like our internal teams. If there's HR, right, for example, clear example just happened recently where there was an opportunity to sign up for a Tickets for Less campaign where people could sign up and get the opportunity to get like rental cars or air tickets or whatever it may be for discount. 2 years ago, we would have had one option, and that would have been to send an email or through Constant Contact. Now we can send a campaign, right? So we can hit with email, then we can again punctuate in between with a text message, then follow up with another email. So that again is very valuable that we can mix the method of communication as much as the core message itself. So that's really, really one of the big assets to Constant Contact for us.
How are you using the things you're learning from an analytical side of things, reporting and those types of things? How do you use that information that you're gaining within Constant Contact to help shape your strategies?
Yeah. So again, classic example, I had this conversation just a few hours ago. So we use Constant Contact for one of our, like I mentioned earlier, for our sales team. We will send, again, subject matter can vary hugely, but it's typically, it could be around our outcomes. It could be around an industry recognition day, so on and so forth. We will send that to the list compiled by our sales team. So their contact lists. Then straight away, we can determine if they're being boxed, basically, and not being engaged with, but, just through those link clicks that we put in there. Had the question, as I say, just a few hours ago when I was meeting with one of our senior HCSs, home care specialists, and she asked, like, are these getting through? And I said, well, with the analytical side of Constant Contact, we can say it is, or we could say it isn't. I'm glad to say that they are getting through, but that's, really important. Really important is that measurability, right? What's measured gets managed, right?
Yeah. One of the questions that I receive a lot personally when I'm out and talking to small business owners is, well, how often should I send an email? And I'm curious, what is your approach to determining kind of like the frequency that you go with? And how does that differ between audiences?
As a business, like we're a large business, but it's trying to, again, to my point earlier, is like determining where we can make sure that our emails are coming through at a point where they're not going to be getting, or where they are getting a face-to-face message from a home care specialist, say. So in terms of cadence, it's always, I think you've just got to think about it. There's a lot of common sense involved in this, right? Because especially with the resend feature that you can use, I'm very much of the opinion that I don't think you want to be sending any more than two to a particular audience from a services perspective on a month. Like, I think that's more than enough. I think, but there's also, you cut your cloth accordingly. For example, if there was a situation where, like COVID was an example where we were trying to relay information to our clients on a more regular basis, right? So
Yeah.
I think if the means and the messaging is poignant and significant enough, I think, you can increase the cadence. But again, you have to respect the inbox of the people that you're sending to. But I think the tone of messaging and the validity of the messaging has a lot to do with that. But certainly from a services perspective, I think 2 emails at most a month is typically the cadence I would recommend.
Yeah. It's interesting. I like what you're saying there about how it makes sense to change. I'm often saying that really your frequency should match the need. And if there is a situation where people need to be communicated with more and they want to be communicated with more because you're providing value in those situations, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I only send once a month, so too bad. But it's like, okay,
Yeah.
It makes sense to do more in that situation. You mentioned the resend to non-openers feature within Constant Contact, which I'm glad you're using that. Is there something within Constant Contact that you would call your favorite feature?
Well, I think the landing page side of things has been a game changer for us as a team, simply for the fact that we can show more information on there. So we can use something, like I say, that's accessible or favored by an audience, exactly like I mentioned with caregivers, right? They respond to texts. If we send emails, they're still engaged with, but there's not the degree that a text is. It's very much their preferred choice of engagement. The landing page, like I say, dovetails, and that plays an important part for us in the sense that, like I say, we can put more detailed information in there if needed. We have the nice thing about, again, with these landing pages is we can be more expansive with our creation, right? Our creativity. So we can embed links in there, we can, graphics, etc. It's more like the email sort of platform, but it can be delivered in a different way. And that's without shadow of doubt, over the last 12 months, the landing page functionality has become incredibly important in what we do. And I cover all audiences with that. So it's all embracing for sure.
You mentioned video earlier and doing some work with, I think you're using Vimeo for that now. Are you using that Vimeo integration with Constant Contact? I think you mentioned doing some work there.
We're in the process of, but that's not something we've done just yet.
Got it.
But that's the plan, very much so. Vimeo's, just to give context around it, is going to work around our caregiver orientation presentations, which are virtual. And that's what we're going to be doing. That'll be our base, will be placed on Vimeo, and then obviously communications around that can be delivered in in association with the presentation. So that's the flexibility or the joining of the dots that makes Constant Contact such a key part of our toolbox, that ability to connect things like that.
Well, let me ask you, what would it be like trying to run the business and doing what you do without Constant Contact?
Yeah, so especially the last 6-7 months, it would have been very difficult. It's an avenue that allows us to, like I say, the key for me is the importance of the messaging. And as part of that messaging, like connecting with clients. And I think probably I'm referencing COVID again, that taught us a lot about making that connection, right? Obviously to our clients, right? We're talking about people that are living home alone. Their only contact on a day-to-day basis might be with one of our caregivers. So making sure that they are kept in the loop, especially at those times when the industry was changing, it was very fluid, regulations were switching, on a frequent basis, making sure that they were all kept up to speed and in the loop. was key, right? To do that without a platform like Constant Contact, and we were talking about email there, it would have just made I don't even know where to begin, where I'd go with that. It'd make it so much harder. Say you get out of Constant Contact what you put into it. So preparation in your lists, quality of the content, and to your point earlier about the cadence of delivery. If you get all those right, Constant Contact becomes a key tool without question.
When you think about, as someone wearing the marketing hat and the things you've learned over the years doing this, what would be your number one tip to someone, or best piece of marketing advice for a business owner or someone in a similar position to yours?
Yeah, definitely take inspiration from different industries. Look outside your own industry and see how you can craft and culture messaging. That's probably something that I learned in the agency background and being exposed to so much varied content. I mean, it sounds crazy now, right? But the internet wasn't even really that prominent when I started. So yeah, we got into magazines and we got into books and listening to music and, all these album covers and CD covers and all these different things that drive our day-to-day lives, other people can relate to. And I think it's important if you can take just to use a Scottish word, a wee smidge of that and bring that into your the industry that you work. It's really a really cool lesson to have. One other lesson that I learned, and I believe this, and I say this to my team internally, is developing strategies or concepts or whatever it may be. Make sure you do it on pad of paper and a pencil before you take it to the keyboard and the monitor. Because I think flow of ideas, and to my previous point, taking those learnings, and your flow of ideas always come out better when you're working on with those two items than they do when you're working on the electronic side. So good ideas come from pencil and pad.
Well, friend, let's recap some items from that discussion. Number 1, showcase the people that do the work. Jonny provides an example of how Care Advantage uses social media for recruiting. It's a great channel to illustrate what the company stands for. It's important to Jonny that they invest marketing dollars in taking pictures of the real people behind the work, along with the activities and events that the company supports. This reflects the overall culture of the company. So don't be afraid to show the real people behind your business. At the end of the day, we all do business with people. People we know, like, and trust. Number 2, broaden your marketing mix. Jonny shares how valuable it is for Care Advantage to mix the method of communication with Constant Contact. Today, he thinks about taking the core message and then sending an email, extending on social, punctuating with a text message, and following up with another email. Using multiple channels allows him to reach his audience in multiple ways, all while supporting the core message. This approach gives you multiple opportunities to engage your audience while taking advantage of the strengths of each channel. Number 3, take inspiration from other industries. Jonny offers the importance of looking outside of your own industry to see how you can craft and culture messaging. When you can make connections to the things that drive our everyday lives, things people relate to, even what you may classify as a boring industry can become more engaging and help you stand out and grab attention. Here's your action item for today. Grab yourself a pad of paper and pencil. Now, I found this to be true for myself, and Jonny agrees. The flow of ideas just hits differently using those items. You just may surprise yourself with the level of creativity you're able to reach. Then you can jump into your Constant Contact account and execute on all of your amazing marketing ideas. Oh, and P.S. check out the campaign builder to save yourself some time building those marketing plans. More details in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Be a Marketer podcast. Please take a moment to leave us a review. Just go to ratethispodcast.com/BAM. Your honest feedback will help other small business marketers like yourself find the show. That's ratethispodcast.com/BAM. Well, friend, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and continued success to you and your business.